Thanks, Jackie. Okay, so a lot of noise about the gas pipeline coming through. And again, and we had MWIC on, and the problem is the capacity. It's not really, you know, the gas itself, but it's the capacity, not having the capacity in this area to help us generate the electricity. So, Mike, what can you tell us?
Well, there is some of the discussion, I think, focuses around, and it has been going on at the Finance Committee public hearing, where there's a special town meeting coming up on November 9th. And there's an article on the warrant by petition for asking town meeting to take a stance in opposition to the development of the gas line. And the gas line basically bisects Shrewsbury south to north along the right-of-way that the high transmission line runs for electric purposes. And, well, SELCO hasn't really taken a stand on this gas line because our thoughts are we're not focused on where the gas lines go. We're really focused on the need for natural gas as a reliable base load service for our customers. And I think if you look at the industry or the landscape in Massachusetts in this century, natural gas in 2000 accounted for about 15% of the generation load in New England. Today it's 50, or slightly over 50%. So our reliance on natural gas as a resource is huge. At the same time, coal and oil have gone from 40% of the base load to a figure of around 6%. So gas is so important and to the well-being of both residents and businesses for economic development as a reliable source. When I say reliable, in most cases it's going to provide power 24/7, as opposed to those who advocate for more renewable resources, which I find, you know, is a great thing. The renewable resources are a wonderful thing. However, the downside to them is that they're not as reliable as gas.
They're also not 24/7,
right?
Right.
So that's the issue. You know, wind turbines typically produce power 30 to 40% of a day, and solar on average is only producing power about 15% of the day. And when you think about that, if it's not sunny or if it's raining, they're not producing power. If it's and obviously in the evening they're not producing power, so they're not as reliable of
or consistent.
Yeah, and consistent, correct. So, you know, we have as SELCO's an owner of Stony Brook, and Stony Brook is a dual fuel power plant in Ludlow, Massachusetts, in western Massachusetts. And the issue in the winter of 2014 and somewhat in the winter of 2015 is that power plant had to run diesel fuel, 7.6 million gallons of diesel fuel that winter, because the gas pipeline that feeds it was constrained. So there wasn't enough capacity to bring the gas in. Therefore, Stony Brook was called on by the entity that oversees the power distribution throughout New England to generate using the diesel, which is much higher cost and higher and results in higher pollutants. So I think gas is just so paramount, and its pricing has kept prices stable across the region, and therefore, you know, I advocate for more gas generation, but not necessarily where the pipelines go. That's not our primary concern. Our primary concern is that we get it.
That we need it. We need we need more.
We need for reliable base load.
Well, there's also the nuclear power plants that are all closing down as well. So
that's a good point to bring up. The all-time peak load in New England is based on megawatt hours. It's slightly over 28,000 megawatt hours. Well, in the 4-year period from 2014 to 2018, 2 major nuclear power plants will be closing down, Vermont Yankee, and it was announced a couple weeks ago that Pilgrim will shut its operation by 2019. In addition to that, the coal plant in Salem Harbor and the coal plant in Brayton Point down in the Fall River, New Bedford area will close. So we're taking offline about 3,200 megawatts of power, which represents about 12.5%. That's a huge hit to us, that if it isn't replaced with something, and if you were to replace it, I had some figures here. If you were to replace it with renewables, you would need to replace that power with 2,400 turbines that ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we just talked about how they only run 30 to 40% of the time. And if you wanted to replace it with solar, again, running 24/7, you'd need about 18,000 acres of land to place those solar panels on. And to put that in,
In perspective to
in perspective, Shrewsbury has about 14,000 acres of land in total. So you'd need to fill the whole town of Shrewsbury, and that's not even 24/7. So while the renewable resources provide great benefit, they're just not there yet, or the technology isn't there yet for them to be the sole producers, and therefore there's a need for either additional nuclear, which has no carbon footprint, but also has certain advocacy groups that don't want anything to do with nuclear, although it's clean energy. The need then comes down to what's the best, and natural gas is the best in terms of price, and compared to coal and oil in terms of its environmental issues. So I think that's the real need for the additional gas line infrastructure, is really to keep a very, the electric grid reliable and safe. Until such time, Maria, who knows, the way technology is progressing today, there could be a point in the future where battery technology is developed and affordable so that you can produce energy with the sun and your solar panels and store it in your batteries, so that there isn't the need for that base load, or as great a need for the base load. But it's
right
not there
now,
yet.
I mean, we need to be generating electricity somehow, and it's right now it's the gas and the other renewable sources that we have, but they're just not.
Yeah, and we are heavily we're increasing our renewable portfolio almost on a monthly basis. We see the need for the renewables. We don't want just gas and nuclear. We have SELCO at the time in 2011, purchased a 13% stake in what was then the largest wind project in the Commonwealth in the Berkshires, Berkshire Wind out in Hancock, Mass. We are invested in that. We, a couple of years ago, we purchased some hydropower from a dam in New Hampshire called Ashuelot River. We have contracts in place to purchase wind power off the coast of Maine. That project is supposed to get up and running 2016, 2017. We already have a power purchase agreement for that. We purchased the entire output of the solar on Cherry Street, 2.5 megawatts, and we are close to finalizing terms for a solar deal on top of the landfill to purchase the output that's about 3 megawatts from that facility. So we are into the renewable, but we really, and the commission really is focused on the mission, which is to provide reliable power at the best cost.
At the best cost, exactly.
So we always keep that in mind. And when we find these renewable projects, we look for a price as well as reliability. So.
All right. Well, we're working on it.
Yeah,
Thanks, Mike. The next topic.